People who had someone condescendingly explain something that they didn't know you're an expert on. What happened? Had a friend of a friend explain the causes and effects of the American Civil War to me at a backyard party. I kept trying to take part in the conversation, and he kept interrupting me. Finally, a mutual friend, overhearing our conversation / this guy's lecture, leans in and says, "You know she got her grad degree in this, right? I'd love to say that learning about my credentials, so to speak, changed the tone or course of our conversation, but it didn't. Somehow it intensified his need to explain S*****T. I can literally teach a class onto me." Classic. I had a sort of drive-by version. I was in a computer store getting a cable or something for a PC build. Customer next to me flags down the sales guy and asks to buy a sound card for their laptop. Sales looks at the lady like an idiot, then goes on for a minute or so about how they don't even make such a product. I got a PCMCIA sound card off the shelf behind the sales guy and handed it the customer, then walked away. I used to work in an air traffic control tower. We would fairly often have new pilots visit and see the airport and what happens from the air traffic control side of things. I was on a break when a particular pilot was visiting and was the only female air traffic controller in that workplace. The visiting pilot finishes his cup of coffee, hands me mug, and says, "Wash that, would you love?" By the time he'd returned to his aircraft, my break was over. He unfortunately found himself at the back of a rather long departure queue. I wanted him to have some time listening to the frequency and absorbing the fact that if a woman is in a professional environment, she's probably not the F***KINGT lady. Every once in a while tech support will escalate an issue to me, and I'll have to listen to a customer try to explain to me how my own program works. I don't care how many times you tell me that it won't sync to the cloud. An application that doesn't even connect to the internet has never and will never do that. Not my story, but we had a few lectures at university given by the head of cardiology at the adjacent hospital. He told us about the time he was waiting to cross the road when a man next to him collapsed. As he knelt down to attend to him, a large lady strode over, physically lifted him, cardiologist not a large man, out of her way, and said in a loud voice, "I'll take charge, I have a first aid certificate." Was being discharged from a week-long hospital stay, GI, and even though I was ready to go home, I was still having some bouts of nausea. Had been getting Zofran while inpatient, and asked the nurse if the discharging provider could send in a script for a few doses. In a sweet, sickly voice, she said, "Oh honey, Zofran only comes in fourth form." I replied with, "Oh honey, I'm a pharmacist and can assure you it also comes in tablets, liquid, and oral disintegrating tabs." She fumbled a bit, then mumbled something about checking with the doctor and quickly exited the room. I may not have perfectly mimicked her condescending tone, but I sure as hell tried. I run a Boffer lab, think foam swords and sports armor. Part of my job is safety checking the weapons, making sure there's no exposed core, it's all up to spec, etc. I'm also female. I was invited to go to another LARP in the area as a gamma runner in my own right. One player there recognized me and asked me to check his weapon to see if it would pass at my game. Another dude interrupted us to show me the *RIGHT way to check a weapon and explain basic construction methods to me. Eventually he was stopped by the opening announcements for that game. He missed every hint that I didn't actually need his advice. Watching him blush when I was introduced with full title was glorious. I've been in martial arts, Taekwondo, specifically, for 14 years, and I'm a 4th degree black belt. I don't claim to know everything, not even close, but I do know what I'm talking about. At my university I decided to try out the Taekwondo club on campus. It was the first day I was trying it, and I didn't know if we were supposed to wear uniforms or not, so I went in with workout clothes, but brought my full gear just in case. Before the class started, one of the leaders, who was wearing a 2nd degree black belt, nothing to sniff at, but still a difference of 5 years of training, came up to me and started explaining the general protocol of class and offered to stand next to me during the class to show me how to do the different steps. Throughout all of this, he seemed annoyed that he was having to explain everything and generally like he didn't want new inexperienced students. I politely agreed and asked if we should wear our uniforms for the class. He explained that if we had them we should, but it wasn't a problem if I didn't have one. I explained that I did have one and said I'd be right back, then proceeded to go change into my uniform. His eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw me walk out with my instructor's uniform and 4th degree belt. Worked at a quilt store for 5 years. I'm male and was in my late 20s at the time. I got this pretty much every day. Eventually I just started working on my own projects in the store in front of people so they could see that I was a better quilter than them before they started talking down to me and asking if the owner was my mother. I was working as a lifeguard and I just get back to the stand after taking a rest **T and I see an old lady dropping a gopher tortoise in the water. I fished it out and yelled at her for dropping it in the water. This conversation actually ensued. This is not a sea turtle. These guys do not belong in the ocean. Yes they do. They're turtles and they live near water. That's not a tortoise. That's a sea turtle. You see his back feet. You see how they're stumpy and not fins. You see how this guy has a small horn right here and a dome shell. Sea turtles have flat shells and flippers that don't have claws. This guy obviously has claws. I've raised these kinds of tortoises for over 18 years and I can tell you that this is a gopher tortoise, which is a protected species here. No. That's a turtle. Wrong. A turtle would have swam off and I wouldn't have him in my hands. What you did to this tortoise constitutes 4 multiple felonies. Drop another tortoise in the water and I'll make sure you get arrested. I'm a neuroscience PhD candidate with a focus on neuroimmunology, and I can't count the number of times anti-vax mommy bloggers have tried to explain the supposed link between vaccines and autism to me, or just generally neuroscience and immunology. Unfortunately, no matter how much science I clearly spell out for them it's never enough, and they just yell that I'm clearly on Big Pharma's payroll, so I just go home, snuggle with my cats, and dream of having Big Pharma money instead of academia money. You need to research what aircraft carriers are like before you attempt to write a book about one. A member of my writer's workshop, after reading a scene in which I described an aircraft carrier as creaking, I have sailed on the US**EISENHOWER**. Not me, but a professor told this story to us. He was at a chain store looking for some fertilizer. A younger employee asked if he needed help finding something, and he said he was looking for insert NPK ratio. The employee then went on to thoroughly teach him about how those numbers are really percentages of how much elemental nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are in the mix. And the rest of the percentage missing is just filler stuff. My professor has a PhD in soil science. The employee was not correct, but he decided to just let it slide since he was so enthusiastic *THESER things that are kind of drilled into you in basic soils and soil fertility classes. Not exactly an expert, but I overheard my Italian-American coworker telling another coworker that tiramisu is Japanese. His explanation was pretty in-depth. According to him the Japanese invented it, which is why it has the phonetic structure that it does. He even pronounced it with a Japanese accent tiramisu, but that the French had perfected it, creating the modern version most people are familiar with. I'm also Italian-American. Tiramisu is Italian for pick me up. I didn't have the heart to destroy him in front of our other coworker, but I laugh quietly to myself now whenever someone mentions tiramisu. I'm doctor in the UK. I went for my compulsory basic training day to learn ride a motorbike, and I was in a group of 6 others. It was a very hot day and none of us were used to being in full leathers. One of the group overheated and felt faint and sick, so took some time out and went to sit down. I went to get him some water and to see if he's okay, but the instructor freaked out and told me to stay away and call for help. The guy was alert and sat up. He just needed to cool off. I again tried to just go over and see if the overheated guy was okay, but the instructor kept yelling at me to keep back and that he will handle this. He was completely panicking and yelling at someone to call 999 as the guy was quite sweaty and faint. After multiple attempts of telling the instructor that I'm a doctor and if I could just go and see if the guy's okay, we may not need to call an ambulance, he then eventually listened. After 10 minutes of cooling down and some water, the guy was fine and got picked up. We carried on with our training, but not after the instructor asked me how long I'd been a nurse for, and why I went into nursing. I'm female and this happens a lot. Had a nurse explain that I needed to drink more water, so more oxygen would get to my brain. At my questioning look, he explained that H2O dissolved into oxygen and hydrogen, and the oxygen travels to the brain. I'm a chemist. Yes, I called the clinic director. I was working with a scaffold company right after I finished my degree. While looking for a job in mining engineering, we came across some pyrite, and one of the guys thought it was gold. I basically explained it's not, because it's hard to, which he replied with, what, are you some kind of rock specialist? My answer was a polite but firm yes. When I was pregnant I was drinking a decaf iced latte. I had some woman in line at the pharmacy tell me the caffeine was going to rearrange the genes in my baby's brain. I'm a geneticist. I actually couldn't even come up with a response. I just stood there somewhat dumbfounded at the absurdity of it all. People explain medical things to me on a fairly regular basis. Unless they're being a total dick, I kind of gently let them know I'm a doctor and re-explain what they said back to them in the right way. Long ago I worked as the cheese guy at Whole Foods, where we were trained that no matter what the customer is always right. A lady came up to me, critical that I didn't have the ostrich cheese prominently displayed. Ostriches are birds. Cheese comes from milk. Milk comes from. Nothing like getting called an idiot and societal scum who probably can't read by a woman who thinks ostrich cheese exists. I had just graduated from a top university, was working at Whole Foods briefly after some crazy ***T went down in Katrina. A contractor was asking if I knew how sagging a traffic signal span wire worked and asked if I ever took physics in high school. I told him I had a bachelor's of civil engineering, so he asked if I had my professional engineer's license, and I said yes. Do you? Knowing that he didn't answer, and we finished the conversation. Then I watched him walk across the parking lot and realize he locked his keys in his truck. There was a guy at work who I get on well with. One day he was explaining the manual. I told him no, that's not how it reads. It links to this, and that thing is referenced by that, blah blah. He gets super defensive and condescending, then says, what makes you the F***king expert? I wrote it. Academic orgasm. I'm a woman that's been working in a hardware store for 12 years. That's all I need to say. I work industrial maintenance, so pretty much every shift I have some crackhead operator telling me how to do the easiest parts of my job. Bro, I know how auto darkening welding helmets work. I know that hot ***T is hot. Lockout tags exist because I don't trust morons to keep me alive, not because I'm worried about the machine trying to kill me. Electrical troubleshooting is not always just checking the fuse. I could write a book on all the dumb ***T I have to hear while I'm working on broken equipment. Of course the fixtures are crap. They do the job. They don't have to look amazing to do it. We don't sell amazing looking fixtures. We sell the parts we put in boxes. I once worked for a small company where I did software development, wrote the documentation, and even fielded tech support calls about a product I'd worked on when the tier 1 support, not that we called it that, couldn't figure it out. At one point I had a customer tell me what a particular statement in a manual meant. They claimed it stated that the software we sold was only compatible with 3 or 4 programs, when in fact it listed those programs as *examples* of other programs it would work with. It would actually work with most programs of that type, specifically Apple iX 16-bit GUI software, rather than the 8-bit Apple II software. I had the pleasure of telling the customer that I had in fact written that manual and my interpretation of that sentence was canonical. I was picked up by an old taxi driver on my way to a skater park with my skateboard. He rudely demanded to know where I had been skateboarding. Nowhere, yet I was on my way to the park. He informed me that if I collided with someone his age on the sidewalk they had an 80% chance of dying from a brain hemorrhage. I politely informed him that this was unlikely and that I hadn't been skating on the sidewalk. He then told me to ask anyone in the medical profession and they will confirm it. I then politely informed him that I'm a doctor and he changed his manner with me completely and became very respectful and interested once he realized I wasn't just some skater punk. My little brother's friend who has worked in marketing for 6 months tried to explain how he cracked Google's SEO algorithm and could get anything to the front page of Google in a week. I've worked knee deep in SEO for almost a decade and I still have little to no idea what drives the algorithm other than speculation and trial and error. I just smiled and nodded while he told me image file names play a huge role in page ranking. Not quite exactly the parameters you're looking for, but still an experience I remember. We had a new person show up and maybe she was just cranky from the 12-hour transatlantic flight or something. But when shown her new office/desk area, she immediately started complaining about there being dust. It was Baghdad. Dust is everywhere. She's being vocal about it when 2 men walk by. They hear her and ask what the issue is. She starts complaining that it's her first night/arrival here and she was disrespected by being shown a dirty desk. So one of the guys rummages around and finds some wipes and starts cleaning up the offensive area. She complained about her flight and about several things as the guy just silently wiped stuff down. She was nice enough to say thanks and him and the other guy left. Then in a curious tone she asked who he was. Our coworker was like, the country manager just cleaned your desk for you. Her face dropped. I filed that away for a few reasons. One is that you're never too good to do the jobs you expect of your subordinates, him cleaning her desk. 2 is that there's something special about humility and common courtesy, not throwing around status. And 3 that there's no reason to make people feel like ***T just because you can, not trying to correct her or embarrass her by tossing around authority. I once had a lady try to explain the best hand job techniques to me. Had a customer with a question. I answered the question, and it wasn't the answer they wanted. They suggested something impossible for the machine process. I explained why it wouldn't work, and again explained the proper way to do it. They then replied, "What'll makes you the expert?" To which I replied, "Take a look at patent number/XXXXXXXX. It lists me as the inventor." That felt good. I'm a young woman who has been playing Dungeons and Dragons and similar role-playing games since I was a child. Almost 2 decades now. I've played almost every week in some way or another for the last 10ish years. I actually have a side job writing system agnostic content for tabletop RPGs. Almost every time I encounter a new group or talk about my interest in a public setting, say a party or something, some dude has to come out of the woodwork and try to explain to me how the game works. I've become very good at casually mentioning how long I've been playing. Usually that gets the hint across, but some still keep right on going. Had a cashier get snotty with me when I told him he needed to hit F5 to get back from the credit card screen. He went into a several minute tirade about how he had been using the software for years and that's not how it worked, then explained something about computers, then on a tangent about how they log his key presses, then something about the servers upstairs and how they're connected to the cloud. I finally had to interrupt him with, "Dude, I helped write this software. Nothing you said, it's right." He then stormed off from the register and I just stood there awkward till a manager showed up and pressed F5. Someone on Reddit 2 days ago telling me how insurance companies work and how I'm spreading fake news. I was sitting at Midwest HQ of one of the largest insurance companies in the USA meeting with their underwriters 2 hours prior. Friend's brother wanted to install new speakers in his car. Amplifier is rated for 4 ohms, so there was no possible way to use these 2 8-ohm speakers because it would blow up the amplifier. His dad joined in and argued with me too. Neither would listen to a word I said until I mentioned that I'm 5 years into an electrical engineering degree, have designed and built a handful of amplifiers, and designed and built a dozen guitar speaker cabinets. Their tone totally changed after that, haha. I had a 15-ish-year-old boy explain how helicopters work to me, badly. I never told him I used to be a helicopter mechanic. The worst is when there is a competition and the correct answer is wrong or a misconception. It happens every day. I'm a PhD chemist and a sea of BS chemical engineers who think they know everything. One of them even told me to use acetone to put out a fire. Well, It was the other way around for me. I wasn't condescending, I just thought he was new, and I wanted to be nice. I was working in this big company, I was nervous, and I really didn't want to screw up, or do or ask something stupid. A couple of months in, there was this new guy in our project, around my age. One day he asked me about some procedures and later he asked me about some calculations. I thought it would be kind of me to treat him as I would like to be treated, so I explained what he asked, and kindly showed him some general things about the project. In this folder you can find what every other discipline is doing, or for this, you might want to check the original drawings, it helped me a lot. And so on. Since he looked my age and he seemed to be a little lost, I just assumed he was a freshly graduated engineer like myself. He was not. He just had a young face, but he had 5-6 years of experience, and had even previously worked in the same company years ago, and now he came back. I was getting a drink at an airport bar next to some guys talking about the recent strikes in Syria. The guy said they launched Tomahawks off the aircraft carrier. I spoke up kind of friendly, that it was from a carrier strike group, not the carrier itself. He said no, they launch Tomahawks from the aircraft carrier. I said no, they launch Tomcats, the aircraft off carriers, but Tomahawk missiles only launch from destroyers, cruisers and subs. Cue about 5 minutes of him explaining how he knew a guy who was in the Navy, and he was pretty sure he knew what he was talking about. Mind you, this was a friendly conversation, so I got to smile and drop the bomb on him in an all-around good way. I was at a MOAC fire controlman in the Navy and helped launch area coordinate in the Red Sea during the gas attack crisis. Make sure to like and subscribe for more daily content. Thanks for watching.